This morning I become a storyteller, and I invite all of you to take a moment and relax and take this story in as I share in the first and second chapter of Exodus. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, that whole generation, died. But the children of Israel kept on reproducing. They were prolific. A population explosion in their own right, and the land was filled with them. A new king came to power in Egypt who didn't know Joseph. He spoke to his people in alarm. There are way too many of these Israelites for us to handle. We've got to do something. Let's devise a plan to contain them. Lest if there's a war, they should join our enemies or just walk off and leave us. So they organized them into work gangs and put them to hard labor under gang foremen. They built the storage cities of Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the harder the Egyptians worked them, the more children the Israelites had. Children everywhere. The Egyptians got so they couldn't stand the Israelites and treated them worse than ever, crushing them with slave labor. They made them miserable with hard labor, making bricks and mortar and back-breaking work in the fields. They piled on the work, crushing them under the cruel workload. The king of Egypt had a talk with two Hebrew midwives. One was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. He said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the sex of the baby. If it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But the midwives had far too much respect for God and didn't do what the king of Egypt ordered. They let the babies, even the boys, live. The king of Egypt called in the midwives. Why didn't you obey my orders? You let those babies live. Then the midwives answered Pharaoh, oh, those Hebrew women, they aren't like Egyptian women. They're vigorous. Before the midwife can get there, they've already had their baby. God was pleased with the midwives. The people continued to increase in number, a very strong people, and because the midwives honored God, God gave them families of their own. So Pharaoh issued a general order to all his people. Every boy that is born, drown him in the Nile, but let the girls live. A man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and had a son. She saw there was something special about him and hid him. She hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket boat made of papyrus, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds in the edge of the Nile. The baby's older sister found herself a vantage point a little way off and watched to see what would happen to her baby brother. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile at the same time to bathe. Her maiden strolled on the bank. Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket floating in the reeds and sent her maid to get it. She opened it and saw the child, a baby crying, and her heart went out to him, and she said, this must be one of the Hebrew babies. Then his sister was before her. Do you want me to go and get a nursing mother from the Hebrews so she can nurse this baby for you? Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go. The girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter told her, take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you. The woman took the child and nursed him. And after the child was weaned, she presented him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son, and she named him Moses, which means pulled out, saying, I pulled him out of the water. That's an amazing story. Exodus 1 and 2. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, feels so threatened by the emerging Hebrew population that he deems them as a threat to his power and orders all the males born to be killed. We then enter the two midwives who refuse the king's order. And the Hebrew mother, out of desperation for her 3-month-old son's life, constructs a makeshift raft and sends him down the Nile hoping for the best. A symbolic, wonderful act, but heartbreakingly limited. I, perhaps like many of you, have read that story dozens of times. But for some reason this week, this story took me in a direction I never imagined. I want to take a look at the two girls in the reeds. The two girls in the Nile. First, you have the sister of Moses. Very responsible. Doing as she was told. She was told by her mom to stand at a distance, see what happens, and report back to her. Then you have the princess. Powerful. But with a far different agenda. Her priority was to bathe and be a princess. Hey, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. In those moments, however, their lives connected. Two very different cultures, two very different people raised in diverse situations come together in the reeds of the Nile to encounter this reality that's floating in front of them. And I got to thinking that without these two girls doing what they did, there likely would not have been a Moses. There likely wouldn't have been an Exodus or liberation for God's people. So let's stop just for a moment and take a look at these two girls in the reeds a little closer. First, Moses' sister, who was doing what big sisters do. They protect the younger siblings. She was told to watch and hide. She's armed with these specific instructions from her mother, but she, in that moment, without her mother present, makes a different choice. Without mommy there, she makes a different choice. An almost certain death sentence for her younger brother soon turns into survival. The other girl, the princess, doing what princesses do. Bathe and dress. The daughter of the most powerful man in Egypt had a role to play in keeping that power. Her father would have expected her to do exactly what she was doing, bathe and dress. But without Dad there, she too moves in a different direction. The strict adherence to her father's law somehow turns into compassion. When I got to this point, I'm reminded that life looks very different when we're standing alone in the reeds of life. In the muck and the mire of life, that's when we come together face to face with crisis, and we react differently to that. In the reeds, when we are alone without mom and dad, without those people around us that have supported us, by ourselves, we then cannot ignore a life that is often ugly, unfair, and unjust. In the murky reeds of our culture, as we stand there alone and face it alone, we, each of us individually, must confront what's before us. We must confront the perils of racism, of climate change, of poverty, of violence, of human sexuality, of immigration. In the reeds, we must confront these things. And I began to wonder, what if Moses' sister and Pharaoh's daughter were with us this morning? What could they teach us? two quick thoughts. The first is that we do not have to read the world as our parents read the world. Or even the previous generation and their generation. We don't have to read it the same way, but boy, it seems awful difficult not to. The Girls was a story of going against the establishment, going against what they were told, the power and the hierarchy, and creating a new and life-giving dynamic. Here we are. We stand just a few months before we enter 2019. Are you kidding me? A brand new year. We stand in the reeds of complexity and information that our parents could never have fathomed. And yet we pine for the good old days. But the good old days pining does very little to solve our present crises. It's been said, and I'll quote, "We can't solve problems with the very same thinking that created the problems in the first place," end quote. The baby in the basket forced the two girls, without mommy and daddy around, to think deeply, to act with conviction, and risk beyond limits. I think that's the first thing they could teach us. But secondly, I think they would stand before us and teach us that in our times of interruption, imbalance, crisis, and upheaval, we still need to speak the truth. We must speak the truth. The girls could have looked the other way. They could have sent the basket down the aisle. Let someone else deal with it. But instead, they spoke the truth. Here is a crying Hebrew baby. They spoke the truth. I had to ask myself, where have I been silent? Where have I not spoken the truth when the truth was floating under my nose? Where have we not spoken the truth in the reeds of our life as a church? What child still remains in a basket crying, whether they are from Syria or Haiti or Liberia or even in our city streets? We proclaim the truth because from that proclamation comes liberation. Our history books are filled with it. That when someone had the backbone to stand up and proclaim the truth, liberation sprung and was given birth. The Reverend Dr. Anna Carter Florence from Columbia Theological Seminary puts it this way, I'll quote her, quote, "God's liberating work always begins in the reeds of the Nile with an interruption we did not expect and somebody we have to acknowledge," end quote. Friends, the truth of this hurting, broken world is floating right under our noses. Do we just send it down the Nile to the next generation? Or will we see it? Will we proclaim it? Will we act on it? Because only then can we ever leave Egypt. Only then can we experience our very own Exodus. Yeah, this is a pretty cool story. But friends, I am more excited about this next chapter. The story you and I will write as we proclaim the truth and see what's truly in front of us. Let us pray.